One of the biggest things that you can have if you are a celebrity is the trust, and that is the big problem, particularly if you are, say, the ex-royals like Meghan and Harry. You see, they are now celebrities. They're no longer part, of course, of the British monarchy. They may have a title, but that's really the only thing they've got to trade on. The problem is, if you are a celebrity, it's a thin line of trust between you and the public. And let's be honest, it doesn't matter what generation you are, you buy into a celebrity because you like them. Maybe you like their thought process, what they stand for, or simply just the fact that they're attractive, good looking, whatever, and you like their music, particularly when you're a teenager, it's a sort of thing. You buy into it because, suddenly Donny Osmond, David Essex, the Dave Clark Five, Tab Hunter, whatever they are, they're all the people that you like in that current moment. Now, celebrity has moved on considerably, as one can imagine, in those particular decades, from when the teeny boppers like Frank Sinatra, and he created an absolute riot at the Paramount in New York City. But you see, today, you need a lot more. And the problem that you need, and this is the bigger problem now for Meghan and Harry, is the likability factor. You see, many people might suggest that Meghan Markle is now, or as Harry Fairsley said recently, one of the most trolled people, was apparently according to him, on planet Earth. Now, when you think about it, he also pointed out that Meghan, only Meghan, went through an horrendous time inside the British monarchy. Nobody else ever went through what she went through. Clearly never looking to look at the back pages, of course, of things like what happened to Camilla, now our Queen. You get the picture. And moving forward, even worse if you want to look at it, while he claims that, there was terrible situations, just think about what happened, of course, to the Princess of Wales. I feel that her, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and of course His Majesty the King, recently went through some terrible times. But where were Meghan and Harry? Where was that public support? You could always throw it back, and I'm not taking sides, but you see how this operates. Now, here's where this gets more interesting, because now, more than ever, Meghan and Harry need your support. They're totally reliant on the fact that you have to like them. That is the brand. And as I've said, this happens to everybody. Look at Barbra Streisand. She recently came out as very political and lost a lot of sales and a lot of her fan base because we didn't really care about her political beliefs. We just thought she was fabulous as Fanny Bryce in Funny Girl and has continued to entertain us for decades. I'm long enough to remember, I'm sure many of you will, remember when Donna Summer made allegedly the ill-advised about disco and the AIDS movement and all of that sort of stuff, and suddenly people were burning her records. That's how bad things got. Now, as I said, the interesting thing that you have to look at is Harry and Meghan have to try and pull this back, and that's not going to be easy. And more importantly, on this week's By Royal Appointment, I wanted to share with you, by talking to some of the people on the inside, what their plans are. And more importantly, if you are going to go along with them, that's the thing. It goes down to that one sellable factor. Can you, the great public, doesn't matter whether the British public, the American, Fiji, China, wherever you are in the world, they need you to buy their product. And this becomes very, very difficult. Now, where this gets really interesting and rather terrifying, as one can imagine, for the British monarchy, is the fact, and there's no two ways about it, is that now Harry and Meghan are allegedly running short of money, funds, cash, and that's all down to them living a very big high life, private jets everywhere, of course, the demands of certain securities, etc. It's their fault as to why they're in this particular situation. But looking at it from a bigger picture, you have to understand that the monarchy themselves are nervous for one single factor. If they then now have to sell anything, it's certainly not going to be pots of jam. It's certainly not going to be the honey, the tea bags, or indeed the wine that somebody's allegedly slapped another label on. It has to be a little bit more than that. The level of money that Meghan and Harry have gone through already is astronomical. Now, you have to remember, this is a woman who's always had a baseline salary, and Harry has had, access to millions ever since he was born, never really dealing with money whatsoever. In fact, he had no idea. And if you remember, when he went to restaurants as a child with his mother, he thought the specials were the fact that they were special and they put them on the menu for him. Again, allegedly. Now, previously, Harry and Meghan have kicked back at all of these particular stories, but there's one telling point now that you can see more than ever. And Harry basically has realised that you can't sue every single person that crosses you. Meghan had that sort of strange victory, didn't she, with the Mail on Sunday, where the letter that she'd written to her father, she won that case, coming out of it with £1 and a minuscule apology, nothing else. So as I say, in today's My Royal Appointment, we're going to delve into that and other stories that have hit the headlines in the last few days. So let's get going. As we all know, Prince Harry actually felt, in fact, that he was far more popular with our late monarch Queen Elizabeth II, and they did enjoy a very fruitful relationship. As I've said to you before, I found it fascinating that he was able to get her to join in on that skit with the Obamas, remember, for the Invictus Games. But that's truly how much she cared, admired and liked the then younger Prince Harry. She saw that he was difficult, he'd had a rather sort of fractious time, but pulled through, of course, by being in her army. And that was part and parcel of the thing, the connection. They got on well, and although she knew that he was never going to be, of course, monarch material because it wouldn't be required, she became very, very sort of close and concerned, just like a grandma would, you know. But of course, Harry enjoyed also very fruitful relationships with none other than Catherine, the Princess of Wales, treating her like her younger sister and, you know, basically telling all of his problems. So much so that they were able to buy him the comedy skit of Grow Your Own Girlfriend, because he'd obviously said, and I know this from an excellent source, the fact that relationships were slipping through his fingers. He didn't understand why he couldn't find the sort of love and compassion and all of that sort of thing that his elder brother, Prince William, had now secured with Catherine. But let's not forget, they had their problems too. But Harry didn't want to go through all of that. That was, you know, he never wanted to see things through. There was always somebody else ready to solve the problem. And that particular person, in the latter years, apparently was going to be our wonderful monarch, Queen Elizabeth. And none more so than when Meghan Markle decided, well, look at this. If they can do that for him, why can't they do that for us? As ever, I have to say allegedly. And what we're talking about here is a situation that's a rather tricky manoeuvre. Because if you remember, the late monarch decided to pay out an instalment, whatever you want to call it, from her own personal wealth for the Duke of York, Prince Andrew. Now, as you know, that's still an ongoing battle, an ongoing story. But in many respects, not really any of our business. It's a private matter. And as I've said to you before, there are two sides to every story, and slowly this story is now evolving, coming out, and we're learning far more. But apparently, according to the source, and again I have to say allegedly, Meghan Markle couldn't understand, well, if the Queen could just give away money like that to her son, why, if, of course, his father, His Majesty the King, King Charles III, couldn't fund their lifestyle, well, why wouldn't the Queen? After all, she adored Harry, right? And they were the best of friends and all of that. Now, I told you in the previous video that Meghan really was stunned by the fact that she couldn't get that final connection with the Queen. You know, the Queen was very savvy, met everybody from world leaders to just everyday people like you and I, and understood the trickery of how people operated. No more so all thanks to her younger sister, Margaret Rose. She understood exactly the world of show business, acting, and the fickleness of people in that particular genre. She loved them, but she knew that they were all about them. And very quickly, as she pointed out to Meghan Markle, you could stay in the profession if you like. But of course, Meghan didn't want to stay in the profession because the profession didn't want Meghan Markle. Of course, Meghan could never actually admit, could she, that her career was in tatters because she was billing herself as a huge Hollywood star and that she was giving up everything, literally everything, for the royal family and couldn't wait to get started. And then, of course, when that really didn't resonate with Her Majesty the Queen, she pointed out via Harry that, well, look what I'm giving up. You know, I'm not going to do the take. I'm coming off social media. I'm changing my religion. I'm literally giving my life over to you. And according to that source, you see, Meghan felt that this would literally open the eyes of the monarch as to how dedicated Meghan was now going to become. Almost an improbable part of the royal family. How could they possibly survive without her? But of course, as we all saw, and as the Queen famously saw, well, Meghan was after one thing: fame, fortune, and global recognition. Now, she'd already got that and she loved it, but really the thing she couldn't stand about royal life, and this is the difference about where we're moving into the world of celebrity now, is she liked the idea of turning up in Australia. She loved the idea of people applauding her, wanting to meet her, touch her, all that sort of stuff. But there had to be something more. Now, there were gifts. and there were beautiful gifts on these first sort of royal tours. But Meghan was absolutely fizzing that she couldn't keep these gifts. And there was a lot of tussles behind the scenes, let me tell you. And again, here's where I feel sorry for the Queen, because, again, if you think about it, Prince Harry should have simply said, this is what happens, this is what we do. And maybe in a later stage we might be able to change it. But no, Meghan wanted to keep these gifts, piling on more pressure for Her Majesty the Queen. I mean, imagine the gifts that she's given away that she might have wanted to keep. But no, Meghan was different. And as Harry pointed out in yet another private chat with Her Majesty, well, she comes from a different background. Hinting, of course, the difficulty of, well, this is a woman of colour. We don't want to offend those because we've never had one of those inside the monarchy. You see how this direction was now going and proving very, very difficult for our Queen, Queen Elizabeth, particularly, as we now know, fighting her own personal health battles. The husband at this point was very, shall we say, precarious. And I don't mean that disparagingly, but I mean, her husband, her beloved Duke, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, she had a lot on her plate. And at this particular point, she thought that she could rely on somebody like Prince Harry. She had no idea what was around the corner. And that's part of the reason why, even now, the royals are terrified about Harry and Meghan running out of hard and ready cash. As Meghan and Harry's financial woes begin to get worse, it's a bigger problem on the horizon, and a bigger problem really for just the former royal known as the Duke of Sussex. You see, what you have to remember is he's in a very delicate position. You see, she keeps going back to the fact that he's her knight in shining armour, going to be rescuing her, going to be looking after everything, the sort of thing. So consequently, Harry's under a lot of pressure. And as we found out, Harry himself, if you remember, famously said on the BBC TV interview, well, he wouldn't have gone down that particular route with the recent court case if somebody had have said, you've got no chance of winning. As I told you, many people told him that Harry believed that he could bring those people down along with everybody else, because some people might suggest, and as ever, I have to say allegedly, that his wife right behind him puts him up there with Hercules. He's a genius. She said that, didn't she? That's why I married him. He's so smart. Right. So when somebody's massaging your ego, you keep going along with it. That's what happens in relationships. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because now for Meghan and both Harry, a situation is developing that they've never ever encountered before. You see, when they popped over, first of all, to Canada and then finally to California, Montecito, people loved them. They adored them. They were new, they were exciting. People wanted them at their parties, their soirees. Events were lining up to make sure they could present an award. It was everything that Meghan Markle could have possibly have wanted, and without having to pay for it. But as we saw very quickly, those awards popped up, and they were very meaningless, the Aviation Award, the Racism Award. Just absolutely tactless awards. Now, the bigger issue, and this is a huge issue for the former royal known as Harry, is the phone calls have stopped. Worse than that, nobody responds to their phone calls. This would have been unheard of a couple of years back. There is, of course, this person with royal connections. Of course you'd want to invite him. Of course you want to get back. But the problem that you have now is the world's moved on. Now, in part, I would say that part and parcel of the problem that happened to Meghan and Harry was they moved and played their timing very, very badly. The world was through the pandemic, everything stopped, and the momentum now seems to be before and after the pandemic. If they'd have just waited a little bit longer, their star may have risen a little bit longer, and they could have in fact become very, very cash rich. And as Harry pointed out in the Oprah Winfrey interview, he signed for Netflix because he needed some money. At least he was honest about that, and that's part and parcel of his problem. A lot of people don't want you to be honest in Hollywood. They want you to basically say you wanted to do the job, you loved it, great respect for the company. So very much from the off, Netflix's, well, shall we say, parameters were pricked with this guy's not particularly grateful for the millions that we're giving him. But of course it paid off eventually when they did their soap opera style documentary. But the other situation is this. According to a former staff member, They put places in, calls into people, fully expecting to hear back. And apparently Harry is dumbfounded by the fact that people simply now don't return calls or are unavailable or will call them back later. And allegedly, this truly never happens. Now, this is what you find in what they call a massive social decline. You were hot and now you're not. And the other problem is that while people still like Prince Harry and have a lot of affection, particularly in America, all thanks to his late and beautiful mum, Diana, Princess of Wales, they're intrigued by him. He was in their faces for many years. But they don't mind him, and this is from that staff member, but they literally have no time for what they would describe as one of their own. Because, as Spotify famously said, people like Meghan are known as grifters, knocking around the fringes of show business for years, never quite really making it, but the bottom line is they're there, available. And of course, every little grain is a stepping stone, isn't it? Whether it was flipping burgers for Men's Health or appearing as a dolly bird on Deal or No Deal. You get the picture. Harry is totally different. You see, he has literally stood next to the most famous monarch ever. And so there's a story there. And that is really the only selling point that Harry and Meghan have left. Not necessarily him dishing the dirt, but they want him. They don't really know or want what comes with him. Now, Harry, according to the source, simply can't operate without his wife in tow. He feels that she gives him confidence, and by default, when he gets up to do a speech, she's clapping like a seal in the background. Well, more importantly, she's waiting for him to hand the mic over so she can take over and clean up. You get the picture. But on a more serious note, this is a situation where they are with cash, and not just on a personal level with celebrity, but also the fact that they're charitable endeavours. A lot of people want to know, what do they see for that? How is the money spent? And this recent debacle with Centre Barley, well, again, not exactly at the right time or the right moment. You get the picture. So for now, as the story goes, yes, Harry and Meghan are definitely looking to see whose purses will snap open for them one more time. But as she's recently realised, the world of podcasting is possibly not for her. The world of jam making, even though it's her thing, is possibly not for her. Where does she go next? Now, certain people are saying she could return to acting. Well, that's loose in itself. She's a soap opera actress, and really, could anybody now see anybody but the former royal known as Meghan Markle? What part could she truly play? As for Harry, the world stage still is interested in him, but he can't let go of the person that's holding him back. And this is where it gets interesting. Lots of people will remember when Prince Harry sat down, if you remember, and said on that TV interview about how, and I thought this was really, really cruel, in fact, that His Majesty the King and, of course, his elder brother, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, well, they were trapped. He was lucky. He could get away, he could jump in a car, he could do anything. Suddenly now he was leading the life that he wanted to lead. He'd been behind the velvet curtain, all of that sort of stuff. You couldn't get anything more disingenuous about those that had loved, cared and shared for you. But this was Harry under the brand new tutelage, of course, of his wife, that's right, the cable TV actress Meghan Markle. And what's funny, and where people don't realise, and I think Harry's slowly opening his eyes up to this, is the fact that in fact now he is the one that's totally trapped. As I've said, phone calls are dwindling, and the only sort of source of comfort, friendship he may now have are his two children, right? That is, of course, what fills most of his time. Other than that, he can talk to the chickens in the coop, and no doubt, if he's lucky, maybe get a slither of jam on a slice of bread, because, as we know, Meghan now doesn't do cooking, too busy for that, too many meetings and all that. She gets deliveries in and then sprinkles some dead flowers over them, so, that pacifies, I suppose, as home cooking, etc. You see, everything is becoming a bit of a farce for Harry. Now, he often complained about the media, and he basically says, he hated the paparazzi, just the clicking of the cameras. Now, the biggest clicker of any camera is this woman. That's right, his wife, Meghan Markle again. She is his own built-in paparazzi. She's there 24/7. Now, what was fascinating about this particular story, and this is where it is very interesting indeed. You see, this video, well, we're all appalled by it, whether you like the idea, whether you think it's royal, etc. It's just grim. You know, it's a private moment that really should remain private. If you've got friends and stuff like that, to put it on the world stage, as Meghan Markle did, is truly deplorable, whichever way you look at it. And then, of course, you've got Prince Harry at the very height of the fact that he's now madly in love with this woman who believes, and he believes, that he's going to give him the life that he now has always been looking for. Apparently a life that his late mother wanted also, even though he was only 12 and had no idea about the sort of rigmarole that his mother was going through. As I've often said, if it wasn't for Martin Bashir, things would be radically different, in my opinion. But you see, Meghan promised Harry that this was just a personal moment, something to look back on, to share between the two of them. And then, as times got pretty desperate, well, she decided to share it with her brand new publicity team. Delighted with the millions of views that it received, and of course, not too bothered about the embarrassment attached to Harry. Now, you see, this is where this is really, really difficult for him, because he can't complain, he can't say anything. This is because he's lost all control. She's running the show and basically saying, well, if we do this, we'll get more Instagram followers and we'll get more money because I'll sell more jams, more products. People will be aware of me. Yes, people did tune in. Yes, the followers did go up. But nobody's buying the product, because if Harry was bright enough, he'd realise there's absolutely no product to buy. So this is the circle that he's now basically in. Now, some people, and there are one or two, that still feel incredibly sorry for him. But the other side of the coin is it's becoming far more depleted. And the bigger issue for Harry, and I pointed this out recently, is when Harry escaped to come back over here to the United Kingdom under the pretense of the security stuff. He really was desperately trying to connect. You know, many people suggest to connect to a way out, find something new, go away in a different direction. I'm not suggesting for one moment that he wants to leave his wife, because he's attached to her. He's pinned all hopes on her. And she, this is where she's very clever. On the podcast, That Man Loves Me So Much, she doesn't reciprocate that message. She basically, one or two platitudes, but keeps him dangling. This should have been something that he picked up on the dates where she threatened to leave if he didn't turn up on time. She was always going to be the leader in the relationship. The Queen worked this out very quickly. But this video, the twerking video, is very, very dangerous for Harry, because according to the staff member who's now gone, she has lots and lots and lots of footage of Harry, of the royals, of inside stuff. And as and when she fancies, particularly in these desperate times, she could start to drop them. And the bigger issue is this, that Harry can't do anything about it, because he has no idea what she's filmed. He went along with it because madly in love, couldn't quite believe his luck, landing this particular good-looking woman, of course, a former actress, and he always wanted one-upmanship over his elder brother. He felt he got that. He, openly said on TV, she wasn't from the right background. He wanted to be different so that people would notice him. I've seen this before, where people marry people who are completely unsuited, but it gives them a talking point, makes them look interesting, because they know without that they're dull. If Harry had only got a grip of his own sense of responsibility, he would have known that lots and lots of people liked him. He was incredibly popular, and more importantly, could have remained popular. But now, all thanks to his relationship, marriage, whatever you want to call it, his popularity has plummeted. You see, everything's geared at him, not at her. And she's very expertly tuned this, in fact. And more importantly, of course, Harry has simply no idea. Do you know what's interesting about the double standards between Meghan and Harry? And it's really this, it's the way it develops, the way this story has unfolded. Because, whatever people think about Meghan Markle, I think she's something of a marketing genius, in the sense of that she's managed to keep her reputation more or less intact. Actresses always get criticised, but she's never really been criticised on a very massive negative level. You might think differently, but when you come from Prince Harry's background, a royal background, to be able to take that level of, love, kindness, people appreciating him, and trash it to the level that she's managed to be able to do, well, it's incredible when you think. Now, if you don't believe me, take a look at this particular situation that's evolving right now. Over here in the United Kingdom, they've decided, as I mentioned the other day, to bring back the satirical comedy show Spitting Image. This time it's just going to be go online, and they can be a little bit harder. You know, they're not governed by the rules of television. And this really is because they felt when they brought it back last time they couldn't get away with too much because of those said rules. Here's where this gets interesting, because they've mercilessly sort of mocked Prince Harry's alleged drug taking. I say alleged because he's written about it in his book. So that becomes a free-for-all. They can have a go at him and there's nothing he can do. The story goes that his lawyers were looking into this, but those lawyers know unless Harry wants to chuck away more money down the drain, there is absolutely nothing. It's there in black and white. You've admitted it, you've spoken about it, and it's been discussed on various interviews. So you can, you know, the sort of fake sort of shock of, oh, I'm not putting up with that. A little bit like all royals do. You know, they claim, oh, you know, legal recourse, look at all avenues. They never sue anybody because really it becomes very problematic. And this is the situation where Harry's now got. But what's also interesting from a source working on the show is this, how Meghan gets off that sort of stuff very lightly. One of the ideas that they were toying with was this, a reoccurring sort of plot line featuring Meghan. Oh yes. And this one was, and as ever I have to say allegedly, where each week or each episode she would be picking up the phone to try and make amends with her estranged father, Thomas Markle, right? And each time it got to the pivotal moment, the idea was she'd put the phone down because something else had made her more angry, and there were sort of firecrackers coming out of her ears, or her hair was flying up in through, you know, absolutely through anger. But they felt that that was a little bit, well, shall we say, distasteful. So again, you know, when you think about it, that is comedy gold, whether you like the background or the story or not. But they're too nervous to go down that particular route. When you think about it, that's a far more damning story than Prince Harry's open, drug addiction. The Sun had written about it many years ago. He was just really talking about it from his perspective. Meghan's story about why she dumped her father, well, is a bigger story in itself. They could have a lot more comedy gold with that. For instance, as we all know, why has Prince Harry never met Thomas Markle, bar one phone call? What on earth did this woman say to make it so impossible for him to think, this is a bit odd? Even when the late monarch interjected and said, don't you think it's time that you made some effort to contact him? Apparently whatever Meghan told him back, well, he decided to adhere to those rules. You see how this works. So while, as I say, people attack Harry on a regular basis, and I'm not taking sides, he is there up for the raking over. But what's interesting is she comes off with it more or less rather lightly. People mock her about her jams and mock her about her videos and stuff and how bad they are. But his reputation is thoroughly shot. And some might suggest, as ever, I have to say allegedly, that's exactly the way that she would like it, because she can step away from this bombshell, this nightmare, and she has a lot up her sleeve. Living with somebody who's openly discussed their problems of mental health, how they've survived, and of course the way that she tried her very best to get him to have a brand new start, surrounding him with love, family, and of course his children. You get the picture. So when you look at how Harry and where he is right now, as I said at the start of the video, he's a micro celebrity whose celebrity is all but evaporated. And the bigger picture is now where he could have rung up anybody, presidents of the United States, leaders, bigwigs from huge companies who would instantly want to donate to whatever project he was going, because after all, it was a bit of royal stardust. Well, what he's finding now is all of those people are just literally looking the other way, or indeed say, we'll call back. What they mean by that is, quite frankly, we'll call back when the situation looks a bit more clearer. With Meghan Markle looking at yet another flop following on from the podcast flop, it's going to be up to Prince Harry to salvage whatever he can, not just in the terms of the relationship, but more importantly, how can he keep that relationship afloat with the money that Meghan Markle has now become accustomed to. As ever, if you can, chums, please do like, share and comment respectfully. And as I often say, take care of yourselves until our next royal appointment.